This lecture is about the effects of stress. By the end of this lecture, you should be able to describe some of the effects of mild and extreme acute stress. You should be able to describe the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as PTSD. You should be able to describe some of the effects of chronic stress. You should be able to answer the question, what are the manifestations of the burnout syndrome? You should be able to describe some of the effects of chronic stress on physical health. You should be able to answer the question, what is the relationship between stress and gastric ulcers? And also the question, what are type A versus type B personalities, and what are some relationships between type A personality and physical health? You should also be able to name at least 3 illnesses that seem to be exacerbated by stress. You should also be able to define the field of psychoneuroimmunology and give some examples of research within this field. So relatively mild, acute, or brief stressors have been shown to impair performance on a variety of tasks. For example, athletic performance, mathematical problem solving, and memory for neutral information. Extreme acute stressors can produce persistent and prominent changes in an individual's psychological functioning. Post-traumatic stress disorder is an enduring psychological disturbance that is attributed to the experience of a major traumatic event. Although most commonly highlighted in soldiers, post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as PTSD, can occur following any one of many different stressors. Some examples include rape, assault, or observing a violent act. We all have a general sense of what chronic stress can do to us, and psychologists have long suspected that chronic stress can contribute to a variety of disorders. For example, heart disease, asthma, depression, and gastric ulcers. The term burnout refers to a set of physical, emotional, and cognitive impairments brought about by chronic work-related stress. A comprehensive model of burnout was developed by Maslach and Leiter in 2001. According to their model, work overload, limited social support, lack of control or autonomy, and limited recognition at work all contribute to the phenomenon of burnout. And burnout includes feelings of low self-efficacy, feelings of exhaustion, and feelings of cynicism. The consequences of burnout include increased physical illness, increased absenteeism from work, decreased commitment to work, and reduced productivity at work. Researchers have demonstrated a variety of effects of chronic stress. Some examples include poor academic performance, insomnia, and drug abuse. In addition, the onset or relapse of certain psychological disorders often seems to be preceded by a period of chronic stress. In terms of the effects of stress on physical health, here are some preliminary notes that you should be aware of. The first is that the strength of the relationship between stress and various physical ailments is not strong. The correlations tend to be in the range of 0.2 to 0.3. The second is that, barring some work done in laboratory animals, most of the research is correlational in nature. So in terms of the effects of stress on physical health, psychosomatic diseases were once considered genuine physical illnesses brought on by stress and/or other psychological factors. Gastric ulcers were once considered the prototypical example of a psychosomatic illness. This perspective was challenged by the finding that almost all cases of gastric ulcers had the presence of the H. pylori bacterium in the stomach. More recent research has indicated a much more complex picture. That is, the presence of H. pylori seems to be necessary but not sufficient for gastric ulcers. Stress seems to play a role as well. Much of the research on the relationship between stress and physical illness is focused on coronary heart disease. This research topic took center stage when Friedman and Rosenman published a study in 1974 that showed a connection between coronary heart disease and a particular sort of personality that they termed type A personality. Persons with a type A personality tend to be strongly competitive, they tend to be impatient, and they're often high in anger and hostility. These individuals are generally ambitious, workaholic perfectionists. By contrast, individuals with a type B personality tend to be relaxed, patient, and easygoing and friendly. They are less hurried, they don't anger as easily, and are less competitive than type A personalities. In terms of the type A personality, the characteristic of having high anger and hostility has been shown to be most strongly related to coronary heart disease in individuals with type A personality. For example, in one study, individuals with high anger and hostility levels were shown to have approximately 3 times as many coronary events as the low anger hostility participants. There's a long list of diseases that seem to be exacerbated by stress, and that's what's listed on this particular slide. We have AIDS, appendicitis, asthma, cancer, skin disorders, stroke, ulcers, etc. There's a long list here of diseases that have been shown to be exacerbated by stress. The large number of illnesses that seem to have a link to stress has led to the idea that stress might compromise immune system functioning. Psychoneuroimmunology is a field of study that examines the relationship between psychological factors, the nervous system, and the immune system. So how does stress increase susceptibility to infection? Many researchers believe that chronic stress can impair immunity via the chronic presence of higher levels of circulating glucocorticoids. Most of the cells of the immune system have receptors for glucocorticoids. More recently, it has been discovered that certain signaling chemicals, in particular a family of chemicals known as cytokines, that were originally thought to be exclusive to the immune system, are also produced by the nervous system, and therefore might be interacting with the immune system. So can stress alter brain structures? That's one of the key questions in psychoneuroimmunology. We know that one particular brain structure, the hippocampus, seems to be particularly susceptible to the effects of stress. For example, in non-human animals, just 1 to 2 hours of stress is sufficient to induce structural changes in the hippocampus that can last a month or more. Moreover, such changes are sufficient to have effects on spatial learning and memory tasks in those animals. So in 2009, McGowan et al. Published a study where they looked at the brains of individuals who had died either from natural causes or via suicide. And they divided the individuals who had completed suicide into either individuals who had experienced abuse or individuals who had not experienced abuse. And this was determined through interviews with family members and other records. And what they found was that the experience of having childhood abuse led to decreases in hippocampal glucocorticoid receptor numbers. And this is probably due to the fact that increased exposure to a neurotransmitter or hormone like glucocorticoids has the effect of actually reducing the number of receptors for that neurotransmitter or hormone. So in this case, the experience of childhood abuse probably led to a downregulation of the number of glucocorticoid receptors in the hippocampus of those affected individuals.